Family, 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 family. How goes it? How's everyone's week been? Has Snowball caused any mischief in anyone's week? Glad to be here. I see the apples and the milk. Snowball lost your keys. Guys, we have so much to cover. I think chapter 8 might be the longest chapter in the book. There is a lot. OKD said he crashed my computer. He crashes my computer every live. He tries to stop us, guys. We're not going to let it happen. Uh, 5 new memberships. Salute to all of the members. You guys help keep this channel going. You guys got me a new camera. I'm sorry, not a new camera, new lens, right? Of course, Snowball is doing everything he can to stop us. We should stop. You know what? With all of us doing the Snowball jokes, we're going to really confuse people about what this book really has to say. We have so many inside jokes now about Animal Farm. Uh, Lucens is a legend, absolute legend. I actually met him. I actually met him at Wisdom School. He came to Wisdom School uh, at the Hilliard Library in Spokane. Was absolutely legit. Love that guy. Um, so, guys, we have so much to cover right now. I'm actually going to move this screen over to the other side. More Akala, please. Akala is very much a beast. I gotta move this down. Okay, come on. How do I? Okay, gotta fix myself. There we go. Perfect. I'm definitely looking forward to doing more Akala. Amazing lyricist slash author slash history buff. I love doing that reaction. Um, so, ooh, I think I like that. Yes. So, I want to immediately get into this before Snowball crashes us. I want to get into the recap of of Animal Farm chapter 7. Um, the Bo Burnham stuff. Yo, did you guys see the Bo Burnham reaction? Yeah, we got to get we got to have a lot of conversation. I think I should go live more often, not just with the book club stuff, but the thing is this book club is confusing the heck out of the algorithm. I'm going to have to move the book club to my other channel. And because the algorithm is so confused, it's like, wait, are you a lyricist? Are you a battle rapper? Are you a philosopher? Are you doing a book club? Are you doing music reactions? Are there reactions or are they responses? Right. And so the algorithm is just kind of all over the place. However, some recaps from chapter 7. And guys, when I freeze up or when Snowball attacks the feed, I can still see the feed over there. So right now it's right in front of me. I'm just going to kind of keep gauging it. Okay. Bear with me. So in chapter 7, what we learned was that the hens rebel. There's a hen rebellion. And as a result of their rebellion, they are starved, right? And we talked about how it was a little bit too late to rebel at that point. Remember, the hens were there when Napoleon took the puppies and just took them to this secret place up on this kind of top shelf in the barn house and was like, yeah, I'll raise them. Don't worry about it. And at that point, when it's time for the tyrant to come after your children, there will be no one to help you either. And that was one of the big lessons we got from what happened with the hens. Um, Another thing is that animals begin to falsely confess. You remember that weird cult-like confession? Napoleon comes out of the barn house and he has all of these animals confessing to him, confessing their sins. And then after they confess, they are systematically slaughtered. It kind of made me think, well, why are they confessing? Why are they standing in line to confess if they know they're going to be slaughtered? They see what's happening. And then it kind of became, well, Napoleon is making himself more like a god in their eyes. He stays away from view. He's always ushered in by this pack of dogs that seem like insanely aggressive. I see that that message about George Orwell won't copyright strike. Yeah, YouTube is kind of crazy, but I'm navigating it. I consider it fun. You just figure the whole thing out. So another thing, this is something. See, you guys are trying to get me off track. Snowball will not stop me. I have a question for you, and this is a question that I posed last time. We got into it. Is Boxer evil? Now I know that that's strange to say. He's like Boxer. Boxer's the hardworking. He said I will work hard. He's just a little naive. He's not evil, right? But guys, this slogan of his, that Napoleon is always right, is actually endangering those who look up to Boxer. Is Boxer evil? Is it fair to say that? I mean, is your allegiance to an evil power equivalent to evil? Because I mean, I'm convinced that Boxer could shut this whole thing down with his strength, with his muscle. George Orwell has said chapter by after chapter that Boxer is stronger than all of the animals put together, and the pigs don't work. What are they going to do? You know, uh, Napoleon actually sicked a couple of the dogs on Boxer, and Boxer like stomped one to the ground and was looking at Napoleon like, "Should I kill this thing? It just attacked me." Right? Um, Super Joe says no, he's been duped. Kim says not evil but naive. Definitely naive for sure. Heather says a tool for evil. Kat says he's evil maybe to some. Um, I see one that says, yeah, he is serving as a tool for evil, but he is not evil himself. He's naive or ignorant. And I like that take, just kind of giving as much grace as we can here. That is the recap. I think we should also throw into the recap of chapter 7 that Squealer has become a complete historical revisionist. He just rewrites history as a matter of course. No big deal, right? Um, Crazy. And this is where we are right now. Um, oh, yeah. Another thing, very important part of recap of chapter 7. Beast of England is now banned. The animals are no longer allowed to sing Beast of England anymore. They have changed it to this two-sentence slogan: Animal farm, never through me shalt thou come to harm." Right? It's just like saying, yeah, I'm not going to hurt Animal Farm. And so Beast of England, which was the utopian story, was the utopian vision dreamed up by Old Major, is now not allowed to be sung on the farm anymore. So we have a ton to cover in chapter 8. Let's get right into it. A few days later, when the terror caused by the executions had died down, some of the animals remembered, or thought they remembered, that the sixth commandment decreed, "No animal shall kill any other animal." Right? So they're thinking this stuff up because they're just coming down off of their trauma from watching Napoleon slaughter a bunch of their kinsmen. So they thought they remembered the sixth commandment decreed, "No animal shall kill any other animal." And though no one cared to mention it in the hearing of the pigs or the dogs, it was felt that the killings which had taken place did not square with this. Clover asked Benjamin to read her the sixth commandment. And when Benjamin, as usual, said that he refused to meddle in such matters, she fetched Muriel. Shout out to Benjamin. There's some Benjamins still among us. You meet them every now and then. People are like, "Oh, it's all the same. It doesn't matter who you vote in. It's never going to change." People who have completely abandoned all hope. Benjamin's refusal to read the law is telling, right? Because they're saying, "Look, there's just been this slaughter, and we need somebody to read the law for us." Benjamin, you know how to read. Can you read it? And he's just like, "No, I don't. I don't meddle in such manners." Benjamin realizes, guys, they're going to change the law as they see fit. what that law says. Haven't they already changed it? Didn't they change the pigs can't sleep in beds to or animals shall not sleep in beds? Didn't they change that to animals shall not sleep in beds with sheets? They just amend it whenever they want. Benjamin has been around long enough to know none of this stuff matters, right? He refused to meddle in such matters. And think of all of the games that they're playing. The animals are playing a game, and the pigs are playing a different game. Benjamin refuses to play either game. What game are the animals playing? They're playing this game to where it's like, oh, even though it seems tough right now, and even though our children are being taken, and even though we're being overworked, and even though we can't have any milk and we can't have any apples, even though all of that stuff, you know, we're still being taken care of, and Napoleon still has our best interest at heart. That's a game, and that's a game that Benjamin refuses to play. But the pigs are also playing a game. They're playing this kind of hierarchical game where it's like, let's just race to the top of Mount Delectable, get as much as we can. Benjamin refuses to play that game either. So I mean, Benjamin is a very interesting character here for sure. But she fetched Muriel. Muriel read the commandment for her. It ran, "No animal shall kill any other animal without cause." It's usually a two-word thing. It's usually the 2 words that they add that just changes everything, right? "No animal shall sleep on a bed with sheets." "No animal shall kill another animal without cause." Guys, this reminds me of the 13th Amendment. You guys saw that documentary, that Netflix documentary called 13th, about the 13th Amendment that says, there will be no slaves. We will banish the keeping of slaves, except for the committing of a crime, right? That was the 13th Amendment. It says, except if they commit crimes. So after the Emancipation Proclamation, after the slaves were freed, the slaves were to a large degree criminalized so that they could return to the slavery that was necessary to keep America going. And a lot of people kind of forget that little bit of history with the Freedmen's Bureau and all the rest of it. Um, but no animal shall kill any other animal without cause. And of course, the ones who determine the cause are the elites. So, somehow or another, the last 2 words had slipped out of the animal's memory, but they saw now that the commandment had not been violated, for clearly there was good reason for killing the traitors who had leagued themselves with Snowball. Throughout the year, the animals worked even harder than they had worked in the previous year. They worked even harder than they had worked in the previous year. Guys, remember the last chapter started by saying they worked like slaves. So now it's saying they're working even harder than slaves. They're working like machines. They worked harder than the previous year to rebuild the windmill with walls twice as thick as before, and to finish it by the appointed date. Together with the regular work of the farm was a tremendous labor. There were times when it seemed to the animals that they worked longer hours and fed no better than they had done in Jones's day. On Sunday mornings, Squealer, holding down a long strip of paper with his trotter, would read out to them lists of figures proving that the production of every class of foodstuff had increased by 200%. What's interesting is that what we're going to learn as this narrative develops is that a lot of their gripes and complaints are now just in their minds. It used to be that the animals would grumble, that they would complain, that they would mention things. The pigs would speak up, the hens rebelled, and now all of the rebellion has receded into your mind. You're not allowed to say things. And we'll just kind of watch that develop. So, Squealer, holding down a long strip of paper with his trotter, would read out to them lists of figures proving that the production of every class of foodstuff had increased by 200%, 300%, or even 500%, as the case might be. The animals saw no reason to disbelieve him, especially as they could no longer remember very clearly what conditions had been like before the rebellion. They saw no reason to disbelieve him. For some reason, I underlined that line, that they saw no reason to believe him, because this channel is dedicated to the accumulation of insights, right? And that word insight means that you've stopped ignoring something. Like when you have that moment when you're like, oh, I get it. Now I get it, right? Oh, it totally makes sense. The reason you do that, the reason you go, oh, I can't believe I didn't, it's because it was right there in front of you. That's why you have that reaction. You're like, oh, I was just ignoring it. It was right here in front. I was just ignoring it. And what's interesting is when it says the animals saw no reason to disbelieve him, it doesn't mean that the reasons to disbelieve him weren't right in front of the animals, right? So many dense lessons packed into this chapter. And I mean we might get to the end of it, but there's a lot to talk about here. Especially as they could no longer remember very clearly what conditions had been like before the rebellion. All the same, there were days when they felt that they would sooner have had less figures and more food. All orders were now issued through Squealer, or one of the other pigs. Napoleon himself was not seen in public as often, once in a fortnight. When he did appear, he was attended not only by his retinue of dogs, but by a black cockerel who marched in front of him and acted as a kind of trumpeter, letting out a loud cock-a-doodle-doo before Napoleon spoke. And so we've gone to from 4 dogs to 6 dogs to 9 dogs to now it just mentions that this is just a big pack of dogs. And now he has this cockerel that's just letting out a crow as if his presence represents the sunrise, right? You see how he's kind of deifying himself more and more. He's becoming more mystical. Even in the farmhouse, it was said, Napoleon inhabited separate apartments from the others. He took his meals alone, with 2 dogs to wait upon him, and always ate from the Crown Derby dinner service, which had been in the glass cupboard in the drawing room. It was also announced that the gun would be fired every year on Napoleon's birthday, as well as on other 2 anniversaries. So it was announced that the gun would be fired every year on Napoleon's birthday. What I find fascinating about this, guys, is that the gun has only been used against the animals. It was like, why are you firing a gun to celebrate one of the animals when guns are what have been, killing them? It took out animals at the Battle of Cowshed. But Napoleon was now never spoken of simply as Napoleon. He was always referred to in formal style as our leader, Comrade Napoleon. The pigs liked to invent for him such titles as Father of all animals, Terror of mankind, Protector of the sheepfold, Duckling's friend, and the like. In his speeches, Squealer would talk with the tears rolling down his cheeks of Napoleon's wisdom, the goodness of his heart, and the deep love he bore to all animals everywhere, even and especially the unhappy animals who still lived in ignorance and slavery on other farms. Guys, beware of sophistry. By sophistry, what I mean is the tendency that certain politicians have. I hate saying politicians, not because they are not great examples of sophistry, they are, but because it's more than just politicians, right? I mean, what a politician will do is they will completely sell themselves to a lobbyist, which means they sell what they're going to do in office to the highest bidder. And then because they have nothing to offer you by the time you see them on TV, they're using platitudes that don't mean anything. Like we're going to we're going to be the greatest we've ever been, and as long as you and I work together, we're going to rebuild, and they'll just have this campaign slogan, rebuild. And it's like, it's not really particular, it's not really specific, but it sounds good. I was like, oh, we are going to bring the stars back. What does that mean? You'll just find it's like that doesn't really mean anything. It sounds flowery, it sounds nice. um, but in his speeches, Squealer would talk with tears rolling down his cheeks of Napoleon's wisdom, the goodness of his heart, and the deep love he bore to all animals everywhere, even and especially the unhappy animals who still lived in ignorance and slavery on other farms. It had become usual to give Napoleon the credit for every successful achievement and every stroke of good fortune. You would often hear one hen remark to another, "Under the guidance of our leader, Comrade Napoleon, I have laid 5 eggs in 6 days." Or two cows enjoying a drink at the pool would exclaim, "Thanks to the leadership of Comrade Napoleon, how excellent this water tastes." What's interesting is that this started in the opposite ditch, right? Remember, the animals would blame humans for absolutely everything? Maybe part of the lesson in this section is that when you blame a scapegoat for everything, it makes you more susceptible to blaming a tyrant for all of the good things, right? Isn't the tyrant usually leading the charge in blaming the scapegoat? So when you say all problems are centered in this one thing, right? That's a sacrifice of critical thinking. And those who sacrifice that critical thought and just say all of these problems are the fault of this one scapegoat are far more susceptible to saying all good things in life are the result of this tyrant, right? So what I wrote here in my margins, if you blame the oppressor for everything bad, you'll blame the tyrant for everything good. You guys are familiar with this, if you've been following the political landscape at all. There are some people who are so in love with the right that they blame everything bad on the left and everything good on the right. And similarly, there are certain people so in love with the left that they blame everything bad on the right and everything good on the left, right? Um, it's very important to get in the habit of recognizing the flaws of the people who you look up to. Recognize their shortcomings, and recognize the good things about the people you don't look up to, which is subtly more difficult in some cases. Thanks to the leadership of Comrade Napoleon, how excellent this water tastes. It's almost like they're saying glory to God, right? The general feeling on the farm was well expressed in a poem entitled Comrade Napoleon, which was composed by Minimus and which ran as follows: Friend of fatherless, fountain of happiness, Lord of the swill bucket, oh, how my soul is on! Fire when I gaze at thy calm and commanding eye, like the sun in the sky, Comrade Napoleon. Thou art the giver of all that thy creatures love. Full belly twice a day, clean straw to roll upon. Every beast, great or small, sleeps at peace in his stall. Thou watchest over all, Comrade Napoleon. Had I a sucking pig, ere he had grown as big, even as a pint bottle or as a rolling pin, he should have learned to be faithful and true to thee. Yet his first squeak should be Comrade Napoleon. What do you notice about that poem? The it's kind of written in like a King James format, isn't it? With words like thee and thou. I mean, eh, Napoleon doesn't just want to be someone that they fear when he approaches. He wants them to feel as if he is in their thoughts, that he is watching them whether they whether he's present or not. Um, Guys, there are stories in North Korea that when Kim Jong Il, which is the father of Kim Jong Un, when Kim Jong Il was born, a new star formed. And when he was born, the winter turned into spring, and the animals celebrated. These are stories that are told in North Korea, right? You get this godlike status, and then people will judge themselves instead of judge you. It's this very, very this might be kind of the creepiest part of some forms of tyranny. Napoleon approved of this poem and caused it to be inscribed on the wall of the big barn at the opposite end from the Seven Commandments. It was a portrait of Napoleon in profile executed by Square in white paint. Meanwhile, through the agency of Whymper, Napoleon was engaged in complicated negotiations with Friedrich and Pilkington. So Pilkington represents the West or the Allied powers, or capitalism, and Friedrich represents Hitler or the Nazis or Germany. And of course, Animal Farm is the USSR and the Russian Revolution. So the pile of timber was still unsold. Of the two, Frederick was the more anxious to get a hold. Snowball got us, but we're moving right along. I'm going back to the poem. Napoleon. Oh, let me ask you this: did you guys hear the poem? You heard that biblical-like poem that was written for Napoleon. Okay, we've heard the poem, so that's a beautiful place to continue. Napoleon approved of this poem and caused it to be inscribed on the wall of the big barn at the opposite end from the Seven Commandments. It was surmounted by a portrait of Napoleon in profile, executed by Squealer in white paint. Meanwhile, through the agency of Whymper, Napoleon was engaged in complicated negotiations with Frederick and Pilkington. I mentioned that Frederick represents Hitler in Animal Farm, and Pilkington represents the West or the Allied powers. The pile of timber was still unsold. Of the two, Frederick was the more anxious to get a hold of it, but he would not offer a reasonable price. At the same time, there were renewed rumors that Frederick and his men were plotting to attack Animal Farm and to destroy the windmill, the building of which had aroused furious jealousy in him. Snowball was known to still be skulking on Pinchfield Farm. In the middle of the summer, the animals were alarmed to hear that three hens had come forward and confessed that, inspired by Snowball, they had entered into a plot to murder Napoleon. Someone said it's still frozen for them. Is it still frozen for the rest of you? Shouldn't be right now. Okay, we're squared away. Think we're good. So, um, they were executed immediately. So Snowball was still known to be skulking on Pinchfield Farm in the middle of the summer. The animals were alarmed to hear that three hens had come forward and confessed that, inspired by Snowball, they had entered into a plot to murder Napoleon. They were executed immediately, and fresh precautions for Napoleon's safety were taken. There's a couple of explanations for why these hens would come forward to Napoleon with a confession that they know is going to get them killed. One, and we talked about this last time. You guys came up with some really, really good ideas for why this might be happening. One of the reasons is that the hens realize that there are certain things that are worse than death and maybe just kind of want a quick out. And that's really unfortunate. But another thing might be these animals are both overworked and starved and sleepless, right? Um, so that can cause a kind of psychological disturbance to where when you're introduced to this godlike personage of Napoleon, you might actually begin to hallucinate that he is a savior. You might actually start to dream about Snowball disrupting you in those ways. So some of this just might be like a psychological horror, which has ended up in what is that? That capture bonding. Um, but it says they were executed immediately, and fresh precautions for Napoleon's safety were taken. 4 dogs guarded his bed at night, one at each corner, and a young pig named Pink Eye was given the task of tasting all his food before he ate it, lest it should be poisoned. Guys, at this point, I really want to kind of go back and forth and kind of understand that Napoleon represents Stalin. So when we're thinking about Stalin and how paranoid he was, Stalin would sleep in different places every night. His paranoia got so bad. Yes, capture bonding. Thank you. Another word for capture bonding is Stockholm syndrome. Thank you for everybody in the chat mentioning that. Um, but Stalin was so paranoid, he would sleep in different places at night. One time, he murdered 700,000 people in a single purge, right? He would torture children to get confession from their parents, right? Really, really deep, dark stuff when it comes to this paranoia, right? Um, which leads me to an insane question. And I have to ask it, and I'm going to ask it on the next page. So stay tuned. At about the same time, it was given out that Napoleon had arranged to sell the pile of timber to Mr. Pilkington. He was also going to enter into regular agreements for the exchange of certain products between Animal Farm and Foxwood. The relations between Napoleon and Pilkington, though they were only conducted through Whymper, were now almost friendly. The animals distrusted Pilkington, and Pilkington is, the Western countries, the Allied powers, capitalists. As a human being, they distrusted him, but greatly preferred him to Frederick, who they both feared and hated. As the summer wore on and the windmill neared completion, the rumors of an impending treacherous attack grew stronger and stronger. Frederick, it was said, intended to bring against them 20 men, all armed with guns, and he had already bribed the magistrates and police so that if he could once get hold of the title deeds of Animal Farm, they would ask no questions. Moreover, terrible stories were leaking out from Pinchfield about the cruelties that Frederick practiced upon his animals. He had flogged an old horse to death. He starved his cows. He had killed a dog by throwing it into the furnace. He amused himself in the evenings by making cocks fight with splinters of razor blades tied to the spurs. The animals' blood boiled with rage when they heard of these things being done to their comrades, and sometimes they clamored to be allowed to go out in a body and attack Pinchfield Farm, drive out the humans, and set the animals free. How ironic is that? That the animals on Animal Farm, they hear about the injustices happening at the other farm, and they're like, "We have to free them. It makes my blood boil that they're being mistreated so much." Meanwhile, they themselves are starving and are just being murdered at a whim based on these confessions. They don't sleep very well. The apples and the milk has been taken, right? And they're just thinking, it's like, man, I can't believe that the injustice that's being done over there, which is good that they have that kind of compassion, but their sense of their own condition. Um, but anyway, the animals' blood boiled with rage when they heard of these things being done to their own comrades, and sometimes they clamored to be allowed to go out in a body and attack Pinchfield Farm, drive out the humans, and set the animals free. But Squealer counseled them to avoid rash actions and trust in Comrade Napoleon's strategy. Nevertheless, feeling against Frederick continued to run high. One Sunday morning, when Napoleon appeared in the barn and explained that he had never at any time contemplated selling the pile of timber to Frederick, He considered it beneath his dignity, he said, to have dealings with scoundrels of that description. The pigeons, who were still sent out to spread tidings of the rebellion, were forbidden to set foot anywhere on Foxwood, and were also ordered to drop their former slogan of death to humanity in favor of death to Frederick. So it's just clearly about Napoleon's personal ambition at this point. In the late summer, yet another of Snowball's machinations was laid bare. The wheat crop was full of weeds, and it was discovered that on one of his nocturnal visits, Snowball had mixed weed seeds with the seed corn. A gander who had been privy to the a ganderer, sorry, a gander who had been privy to the plot had confessed his guilt to Squealer and immediately committed suicide by swallowing deadly nightshade berries. The animals now also learned that Snowball had never, as many of them had believed, hitherto received the order of Animal Hero First Class. This was merely a legend, which had been spread some time after the Battle of the Cowshed by Snowball himself. So far from being decorated, he had been censured for showing cowardice in the battle. Once again, some of the animals heard this with a certain bewilderment, but Squealer was soon able to convince them that their memories had been at fault. The ability to alter reality at will um, is a very unique superpower when a tyrant kind of has that ability. I feel like it's kind of rare. Um, but in the autumn, by a tremendous, exhausting effort, for the harvest had to be gathered at almost the same time, the windmill was finished. The machinery had still to be installed, and Whymper was negotiating the purchase of it. But the structure was completed. In the teeth of every difficulty, in spite of inexperience, of primitive implements, of bad luck, and of Snowball's treachery, the work had been finished, punctually to the very day. I think that it's important at this point to recognize, because we're talking about a revolution in a time period where there was a lot of death. And it's important to recognize that though those people died under Stalin, they were kind of extraordinary human beings. In less than 10 years, they turned a fairly poor agrarian culture into one of the world's major superpowers, you know? So I think when reading about things like this, it's so difficult. I've been researching like how to do it, or if there'll ever be a time where the millions and millions of people who died under Stalin will ever be anything more than just numbers. Like, what can we do to appreciate them more? Right? Uh, they outproduced the Nazis in artillery, in tank production. You know, these are incredible human beings. Um, But tired but proud, the animals walked round and round their masterpiece, which appeared even more beautiful in their eyes than when it had been built the first time. Moreover, the walls were twice as thick as before. Nothing short of explosives would lay them low this time. And when they thought of how they had labored, what discouragements they'd overcome, and the enormous difference that would be made in their lives when the sails were turning and the dynamos running, when they thought of all this, their tiredness forsook them, and they gamboled round and round the windmill, uttering cries of triumph. Napoleon himself, attended by his dogs and his cockerel, came down to inspect the completed work. He personally congratulated the animals on their achievement and announced that the mill would be named Napoleon Mill. So he names it Napoleon Mill, which, I mean, the first thing that we're going to think, right, is like, what an asshole. You know, he he didn't do any of the work, you know. He basically starves these animals, he's terrifying them. And then he names the completed work after himself. And to some extent, of course, it would be right. Napoleon Tower, Napoleon Mill. But at the same time, think about the psychological effect. What if this is an honor for them because of how godly they see Napoleon? He has so warped their mind that some of his abuses are just like they're waiting for a crumb to fall off of his table. And that's the real horror of it when you really start to think deeply about these things. I mean, they're already confessing to him and being killed, right? Um, 2 days later, the animals were called together for a special meeting in the barn. They were struck dumb with surprise when Napoleon announced that he sold the pile of timber to Frederick. I'm sorry, I'm confused at why they're still dumbstruck at Napoleon's selfish decisions at this point. But they were struck dumb with surprise when Napoleon announced that he had sold the pile of timber to Frederick. Tomorrow, Frederick's wagons would arrive and begin carting it away. Throughout the whole period of his seeming friendship with Pilkington, Napoleon had really been in secret agreement with Frederick. Tactics, comrades. Tactics. You remember that? I think it was the end of chapter 4, where he said, Napoleon had wanted to build the windmill the entire time. Snowball was playing for the other team. And tactics, comrades. Just remember tactics. All relations with Foxwood had been broken off. Insulting messages had been sent to Pilkington. The pigeons had been told to avoid Pinchfield Farm and to alter their slogan from death to Frederick to death to Pilkington. At the same time, Napoleon assured the animals that the stories of an impending attack on Animal Farm were completely untrue, and that the tales about Frederick and his cruelty to his own animals had been greatly exaggerated. So here's the question. Why, oh, why does Napoleon trust Frederick? Or to put it this way, why in hell does Stalin trust Hitler? Stalin doesn't trust his own shadow, right? Stalin has no trust for anybody. And yet, the one person he decides to trust is like clearly the least trustworthy. You know, why? Let me know what you think. Or do you think it wasn't trust? Do you think Stalin didn't trust Hitler and he just maybe thought he was using him? Patrick says dictators tend to trust other dictators. Maybe. Patrick, I love you, by the way, if that's you. um, you see, the enemy thinks the same. It's a better deal. It was convenient. So, historians have said that, Stalin maybe didn't trust Hitler. Stalin thought that Hitler was spread too thin. He had troops in Britain. He had a lot of troops in Germany. He was kind of spread a little bit too thin, so he wouldn't be dumb enough to invade. Right? He wouldn't be dumb enough at this point. So a lot of historians think that that's the case. But another reason that Stalin trusted Hitler was because when you are surrounded by a bunch of yes men, when you are surrounded by people who are afraid to tell you anything that's not already in your own mind because you'll kill them, right? Then you start to get this subtle sense of your own genius. You kind of get this subtle sense of your own brilliance. Like whatever I think just must be gold. I must really be God, right? And I think that there was a lot of that operating in Stalin too, because there were so many people afraid to say anything to him. Maybe it was a mix of the two. Anyway, it's crazy that trust happened. Maybe it wasn't trust, but that alliance happened for the short time that it did. All these rumors had probably originated with Snowball and his agents. It now appeared that Snowball was not, after all, hiding on Pinchfield Farm, and in fact had never been there in his life. He was living in considerable luxury, so it was said, at Foxwood, and had in reality been a pensioner, a pensioner of Pilkington for years past. The pigs were in ecstasies over Napoleon's cunning, but seeming to be friendly with Pilkington, he had forced Frederick to raise his price by £12. But the superior quality of Napoleon's mind, said Squealer, was shown in the fact that he trusted nobody, not even Frederick. Frederick had wanted to pay for the timber with something called a check, which, it seemed, was a piece of paper with a promise to pay written upon it. But Napoleon was too clever for him. He had demanded payment in real £5 notes, which were to be handed over before the timber was removed. Already Frederick had paid up, and the sum he had paid was just enough to buy the machinery for the windmill. Hmm. Napoleon at this point in the story is being praised for not being duped by promissory notes. Guys, this kind of thing, if you really dig in, is the brilliance of George Orwell, I think. Because what he's saying is like, Squealer is saying, look how brilliant our comrade Napoleon is. He's not going to be duped by promissory notes in the future that are never happening. We know that that check is going to bounce. We want cash. We want it right now. And yet, what is the irony of that? What's the irony? Let me know in the chat if you caught the subtle irony. We're praising Napoleon now for not being willing to take a promissory note, to take a check. He wants it right now, right? And I was like, oh yeah, praise Napoleon for being smart enough not to be duped by, you know, I'll take this now and I'll pay you later, right? The irony about this, guys, is that all of the animals on Animal Farm are taking a promissory note from the pigs. They're saying, "Oh yeah, keep working, keep doing this, and eventually you'll have something." Eventually, after we get all this stuff done, and after we, obliterate all of the human beings, and eventually you'll have your share. They've gotten rid of Beasts of England, which was the song that promised them that utopia in the beginning. I love when authors hide stuff in there like that. It's just a really, really bittersweet thing that they're like, oh, yeah, Napoleon's not going to take a promissory note. He wants it right now. And that's the smart way to do it. And yet here they are in this situation where they've accepted this big lie, based on some fantasy of something coming in the future while they're starving and being systematically killed. Meanwhile, the timber was being carted away at high speed. When it was all gone, another special meeting was held in the barn for the animals to inspect Frederick's banknotes. Smiling uh, beatifically and wearing both his decorations, Napoleon reposed on a bed of straw on the platform, with his money at his side, neatly piled on a china dish from the farmer's kitchen. And isn't it just so clear that Napoleon has begun to worship the thing that he's supposed to oppose? Like he just loves all of the human stuff. He now has a china dish from the farmhouse, and you know, he sleeps in the bed. He's just trying to really be Jones, and he embodies the spirit of Jones already. 3 days later, there was a terrible hullabaloo. Whymper, his face deadly pale, came racing up the path on his bicycle, flung it down in the yard, and rushed straight into the farmhouse. The next moment, a choking roar of rage sounded from Napoleon's apartments. The news of what had happened sped round the farm like wildfire. The banknotes were forgeries. Frederick had gotten the timber for nothing. Napoleon called the animals together immediately, and in a terrible voice pronounced the death sentence upon Frederick. When captured, he said, Frederick should be boiled alive. At the same time, he warned them that after this treacherous deed, the worst was to be expected. Frederick and his men might make their long expected attack at any moment. Sentinels were placed at all the approaches to the farm. In addition, 4 pigeons were sent to Foxwood with a conciliatory message, which it was hoped might reestablish good relations with Pilkington. The very next morning, the attack came. The animals were at breakfast when the lookouts came racing in with news that Frederick and his followers had already come through the 5-barred gate. Boldly enough, the animals sallied forth to meet them. But this time they did not have the easy victory that they had had at the Battle of Cowshed. There were 15 men with half a dozen guns between them, and they opened fire as soon as they got within 50 yards. The animals could not face the terrible explosions and the stinging pellets, and in spite of the efforts of Napoleon and Boxer to rally them, they were soon driven back. Guys, what's so sad about this, thinking of it in terms of Stalin's behavior when the Nazi invasion happened, is that they could have been taken care of a lot better than they were. A lot of the famines during that time were directly due to Stalin's behavior. Like there were grain quotas that caused mass starvation. Skilled farmers were deported by Stalin, right? Or executed, right? And so all of these things, even the unpreparedness and the famine infecting all of the people who had to now fight this, it didn't have to be the way that it was. A number of them were already wounded. They took refuge in farm buildings and peeped cautiously out from chinks and knotholes. The whole of the big pasture, including the windmill, was in the hands of the enemy. For the moment, even Napoleon seemed at a loss. He paced up and down without a word, his tail rigid and twitching. Wistful glances were sent in the direction of Foxwood. If Pilkington and his men would help them, the day might yet be won. But at this moment, the 4 pigeons who had been sent out on the day before returned, one of them bearing a scrap of paper from Pilkington. On it was penciled the words, "Serves you right." So he's betrayed by like everyone he trusts, which is kind of the result of living in an echo chamber. So much of this book is dedicated to attempts to r- rescue us from echo chambers and saying, kind of come back and use critical thought. And don't think that the people who you think are so great are not deeply flawed. And don't think that those who you think are deeply flawed are not really good in some ways, right? Just, you know, it's just a repetitive thing in this book. But meanwhile, Frederick and his men had halted about the windmill. The animals watched them, and a murmur of dismay went round. 2 of the men had produced a crowbar and sledgehammer. They were going to knock the windmill down. "Impossible," cried Napoleon. "We have built the walls far too thick for that. They could not knock it down in a week. Courage, comrades." But Benjamin was watching the movements of the men intently. The 2 with the hammer and the crowbar were drilling a hole near the base of the windmill. Slowly, and with an air almost of amusement, Benjamin nodded his long muzzle. "I thought so," he said. "Do you not see what they're doing? In a moment they're going to pack blasting powder into that hole." Guys, Benjamin has witnessed demolition before. Remember what Benjamin would say? He would say that cryptic message: "None of you have seen a donkey dead before," right? Donkeys live a long time. That's usually the only thing he says. But now he says, "I thought so. Do you not see what they're doing? In another moment, they're going to pack blasting powder into that hole." And the thing is, when I imagine Benjamin saying this, I don't imagine him saying it sad. I don't imagine he's saying it like depressed, like, "Oh no, you see what they're doing." It's almost like he's saying, like, with fascination, like, it's all happening again. I've seen all this before. Everything happens the same way. It says, "Watch, just watch this. Watch, they're gonna pack, they're gonna pack that with blasting powder, and they're gonna blow the whole thing up." It's I think there should be like an alternate book about Benjamin. Somebody should make a movie about Benjamin, just the whole animal farm told from the perspective of Benjamin. Would be a lit movie. Um, Benjamin was watching the movements of the men intently. Okay, so we already went through that. I thought so, he said. Do you not see what they're doing? In another moment, they're going to pack blasting powder into that hole. Terrified, the animals waited. It was impossible now to venture out of the shelter of the buildings. After a few minutes, the men were seen to be running in all directions. Then there was a deafening roar. The pigeons swirled into the air, and all the animals except Napoleon flung themselves flat onto their bellies and hid their faces. When they got up again, a huge cloud of black smoke was hanging where the windmill had been. Slowly the breeze drifted it away. The windmill had ceased to exist. At this sight, the animals' courage returned to them. The fear and despair they had felt a moment earlier were drowned in their rage against this vile, contemptible act. A mighty cry for vengeance went up, and without waiting for further orders, they charged forth in a body and made straight for the enemy. This time they did not heed the cruel pellets that swept over them like hail. It was a savage, bitter battle. The men fired again and again, and when the animals got to close quarters, lashed out with their sticks and their heavy boots. A cow, 3 sheep, and 2 geese were killed, and nearly everyone was wounded. Even Napoleon, who was directing operations from the rear, had the tip of his tail chipped by a pellet. But the men did not go unscathed either. 3 of them had their heads broken by blows from boxers' hooves. Guys, Boxer was the one who was almost in tears at knocking out a guy. I mean, to be fair, he thought he'd killed him. He had his horseshoe on, and at the Battle of Cowshed, he knocked this guy completely out. And he was really, really shaken up by that. Boxer's a really big guy, but he's not. He's a very gentle soul. He's just kind of a naive, gentle soul who works really hard. But now he's just offing people. And he's kind of lost himself. He's lost his entire identity in Napoleon's identity. Another was gored in the belly by a cow's horn. Another had his trousers nearly torn off by Jessie and Bluebell. And when the 9 dogs of Napoleon's own bodyguard, whom he had instructed to make a detour under cover of the hedge, suddenly appeared on the men's flank, baying ferociously, panic overtook them. They saw that they were in danger of being surrounded. Frederick shouted to his men to get out while the going was good, and the next moment the cowardly enemy was running for dear life. The animals chased them right down to the bottom of the field and got in some last kicks as they forced their way through the thorn hedge. They had won, but they were weary and bleeding. Slowly they began to limp back towards the farm. The sight of their dead comrades stretched upon the grass moved some of them to tears, and for a little while they halted in sorrowful silence at the place where the windmill had once stood. I love George Orwell's use of silence here. We did a wisdom school, I think it was 4 weeks back at the Hilliard Library, on the power of silence. Because when you're silent, your intuition can speak. Squealer doesn't want your intuition to speak. Whenever you're feeling something, he has words for that. You know, or there's some kind of slogan, right? Um, but when you're silent, it's really, really important sometimes to just allow yourself to feel something without necessarily labeling the feeling. Um, Even the foundation was partially destroyed. And in rebuilding it, they could not this time, as before, make use of the fallen stones. This time, the stones had vanished too. The force of the explosion had flung them into distances of hundreds of yards. It was as though the windmill had never been. That is the best line of this chapter. If you have a paper copy of this book, this is a line you should circle. It was as if the windmill had never been. Remember, what does the windmill represent? You remember a couple of chapters ago, Napoleon said, it said about Napoleon, when Napoleon and Snowball were arguing, it said Napoleon had been against the windmill the whole time. The windmill represents the prosperity of the animals, right? Napoleon had been against the windmill the entire time. The windmill represents their prosperity, right? And this line says, it was as though the windmill had never been. All of their work, all of those years, all of the injuries, some of the deaths, right? All of the thwarts by the ghost of Snowball, all of that, it's destroyed so thoroughly that it's as if it's as if you never started. You just gave your life and your muscles and some of your comrades to this thing. Gigi says wasted commitments. For sure. I think that's the best line in this chapter. As they approached the farm, Squealer, who had unaccountably been absent during the fighting, came skipping towards them, whisking his tail and beaming with satisfaction, and the animals heard from the direction of the farm buildings the solemn booming of a gun. "What is that gun firing for?" said Boxer. "To celebrate our victory," cried Squealer. Imagine firing off a gun as people with bullets in them are returning home. Like, why are you firing a gun? Boxer's completely said, "What is that gun for?" So Squealer says, "To celebrate our victory." "What victory?" said Boxer. His knees were bleeding. He had lost a shoe and split his hoof, and a dozen pellets had lodged themselves in his hind leg. "What victory, comrade? Have we not driven the enemy off our soil, the sacred soil of Animal Farm?" Guys, when is it irrational? When is it irrational to look on the bright side? Squealer is saying, look on the bright side. I mean, we didn't get the animal farm taken. You're still alive. That kind of shows the depth of the depravity of this situation. If if winning just means you didn't die, what kind of victory is that? Maybe it'll begin to dawn on them that there are fates worse than death. It's interesting because there's always a way to look on the bright side. And there are times where it's definitely the wrong thing to do. Pariah says, when it makes you complicit to harm. Yak says, I remember this part in high school, the classroom discussion. Guys, I'm going to link you into something at the end of this, so stay tuned. It's going to be pretty awesome. Um, so Boxer's response is, but they have destroyed the windmill, and we had worked on it for 2 years. What matter? We will build another windmill. We'll build 6 windmills if we feel like it. You do not appreciate, comrade, the mighty thing that we've done. The enemy was in occupation of this very ground that we stand upon, and now, thanks to the leadership of Comrade Napoleon, we have won every inch of it back again. Boxer says, then we have won back what we had before. That is our victory, said Squealer. They limped into the yard. The pellets under the skin of Boxer's legs smarted painfully. He saw ahead of him the heavy labor of rebuilding the windmill from the foundations. and already in imagination he braced himself for the task. Guys, I used to work in the oil field at Halliburton in Fort Lupton, Colorado. These are 15-hour days, 365 days a year. You work for 15 hours a day for 2 weeks straight, and then they send you home for a week to gain your sanity. And then you're back to the oil field. I sometimes when it's cold, whenever it's wintertime, I still imagine those guys. I still think about those guys because they're swinging hammers at steel chicksons. Like when it's rig down day, this is whenever when it said this about Boxer, when it said he mentally had to brace himself for the task of rebuilding this windmill. It's almost like waking up in winter. You wake up and it's 2 degrees outside, and I would have to get on this bus, right? With my hard hat on, and this bus just drives you to the frack field. And when that bus leaves, you're there for the next 15 hours fracking, right? It doesn't matter what the weather is, that bus isn't coming back, right? And just mentally kind of bracing yourself. um, it's insane that I did that. I'm glad I got married. You can't work at that at Halliburton and be married. It's not going to work out. But for the first time, it occurred to him he was 11 years old, and that perhaps his great muscles were not quite what they had once been. Guys, think about this. His slogan was like, I will work harder. He gave up his identity for this group. His identity is, I will work harder. And now, for the first time, he's getting a little breath of critical thought and thinking, you know what? I'm getting older. I might not be able to work harder, right? I might not be able to do this as fast or as well. And if I don't, that just means I'll be working longer. He needs a new identity. But when the animals saw the green flag flying, Kim said that's 38 in human years. I'm 38 in human years. That's crazy. The animals slain in the battle were given a solemn funeral. Boxer and Clover pulled the wagon which served as a hearse, and Napoleon himself walked at the head of the procession. 2 whole days were given over to celebrations. There were songs, speeches, and more firing of the gun, and a special gift of an apple was bestowed on every animal. It's crazy that that an apple is a special gift now. It's only a special gift because the pigs took all of them. Isn't it crazy that you can have something taken from you and now you don't identify with the thing taken from you and now it's a special gift? With 2 ounces of corn for each bird and 3 biscuits for each dog, it was announced that the battle would be called the Battle of the Windmill, and that Napoleon had created a new decoration, the Order of the Green Banner, which he had conferred upon himself. In the general rejoicings, the unfortunate affair of the banknotes was forgotten. It was a few days later that it was a few days later than this that the pigs came upon a case of whiskey in the cellars of the farmhouse. It had been overlooked at this time when the house was first occupied. That night there came from the farmhouse the sound of loud singing, in which, to everyone's surprise, the strains of Beasts of England were mixed up. Guys, so now the pigs have found the whiskey and they're getting drunk. And as they're drunk, they're singing an illegal song. They're singing a song that Napoleon has made illegal, Beasts of England. And why are they singing Beasts of England? Why are they allowed to sing it? Well, maybe because the promise only really applies to them. At about 9:30, Napoleon, wearing an old bowler hat of Mr. Jones, was distinctly seen to emerge from the back door, galloping rapidly round the yard, and disappear indoors again. But in the morning, a deep silence hung over the farmhouse. Not a pig appeared to be stirring. It was nearly 9 o'clock when Squealer made his appearance, walking slowly and dejectedly, his eyes dull, his tail hanging limply behind him, and with every appearance of being seriously ill. He called the animals together and told them he had a terrible piece of news to impart. Comrade Napoleon was dying. A cry of lamentation went up. Straw was laid down outside the doors of the farmhouse, and the animals walked on tiptoe. With tears in their eyes, they asked one another what they should do if their leader were taken away from them. A rumor went round that Snowball had after all contrived to introduce poison into Napoleon's food. At 11 o'clock, Squealer came out to make another announcement. As his last act upon earth, Comrade Napoleon had pronounced a solemn decree. The drinking of alcohol was to be punished by death. By the evening, however, Napoleon appeared to be somewhat better, and the following morning Squealer was able to tell them that he was well on the way to recovery. But the evening of that day Napoleon was back to work, and on the next day it was learned that he had instructed Whymper to purchase in Willington some booklets on brewing and distilling. A week later, Napoleon gave orders that the small paddock beyond the orchard, which it had previously been intended to set aside as a grazing ground for animals who were past work, was to be plowed up. It was given out that the pasture was exhausted and needed reseeding. But it soon became known that Napoleon intended to sow it with barley. So, guys, Napoleon intends to do a lot more drinking, and he's repurposing things that the animal needs for his own amusement. And we have to go back to Stalin because Stalin did this all the time. He repurposed the needs of his people for his own self aggrandizement. One example was the Russian Orthodox Church. Right, this is a place where people went for solace, for meaning, and he repurposed these a lot for propaganda theaters to just kind of self-aggrandize himself and worship himself. Another one was the Moscow Metro. Um, Tens of thousands of people were worked to death on the Moscow Metro, which was supposed to be something which helped workers commute to their jobs and back home in an efficient manner. But he wanted it adorned with marble, and he wanted statues of himself erected in this area, and just worked tens of thousands of people to death on this thing. Um, and I think that's what's meant by Orwell's depiction of Napoleon as someone who's going to, take, you know, things which were intended to set aside as grazing ground for animals and just use them to grow beer. About this time, there occurred a strange incident which hardly anyone was able to understand. One night, at about 12 o'clock, there was a loud crash in the yard, and the animals rushed out of their stalls. It was a moonlit night. At the foot of the end of the wall of the big barn, where the 7 commandments were written, there lay a ladder broken in 2 pieces. Squealer, temporarily stunned, was sprawling beside it, and near at hand there lay a lantern, a paintbrush, and an overturned pot of white paint. The dogs immediately made a ring round Squealer and escorted him back to the farmhouse as soon as he was able to walk. None of the animals could form any idea as to what this meant, except old Benjamin, who nodded his muzzle with a knowing air and seemed to understand, but would say nothing. Guys, maybe Benjamin was on the farm prior to Jones having a drinking problem, and he knew where Jones' drinking problem led. And so this simple nod, he's saying, "Yeah, I understand where this is going. It all happens the same way. He's seen it all before." But a few days later, Muriel, reading over the 7 commandments to herself, noticed that there was yet another one of them which the animals had remembered wrong. They had thought the fifth commandment was no animal shall drink alcohol, but there were two words that they had forgotten. Actually, the commandment read, no animal shall drink alcohol to excess. You know the funny thing about this addition to the law, no animal shall drink alcohol to excess, is drinking all alcohol to excess is what made him fall off the ladder after after adding excess to the law. Right? That's probably why the ladder fell over and woke everybody up. Is because the pigs have taken up drinking, and so now they're like, "Oh, go up there and change the law," you know? And he goes up there and he's changing it, so we can drink, just don't drink to excess, but yet he falls off the ladder. Wow, we just ran up to the end of chapter 8. Man, that was the end of chapter 8. Uh, I hear see Kim saying, "Is anyone else getting an echo?" Anybody else hearing an echo? Am I sounding good? I am going to put something in the chat. Hang with me. Hang tight. Toit like Toiger. And you guys know where that's from? Toit like Toiger? Toit. I think it's an Austin Powers movie. Hang on a second. Okay. Guys, check this out. I am posting in the chat right now. Before I post this in the chat, I want to let you know what's happening. These readings, the rest of Animal Farm and 1984, which we're going over next, and then after 1984, I really, really want to read um, uh, Ishmael by Daniel Quinn. The remainder of this book and subsequent books will no longer be read on this channel. And the reason for that is that it is deeply confusing the algorithm, because I was doing reaction videos and everybody kind of knew me for that. And I was like, oh, I like dystopian literature. And then somebody's like, oh, you like dystopian literature just like Ren does. And I looked up Ren and he likes dystopian literature. And so we started this book club and it became something amazing. But it is confusing the algorithm. It's like, okay, what the heck is this channel? Is it a book club channel? Is it a reaction video channel? Is it music? I mean, I'm already all over the place as it pertains to like what I love music wise, hip hop, rock, what have you. What I'm posting in the chat right now is a link to where future books will be. So stay subscribed here, but also go over and subscribe there and click the notification bell over on that channel. That channel is called The Layman. I'm putting that there now and I'm pinning it. Right. So the message is pinned. Anyone go over there right now, add another, add another tab and go over to that channel. There's only like 5 videos on there. I just started that channel like a couple of days ago. So I'm thinking like, why are some of my videos not moving? Why am I not in the algorithm as much as I was? And it's because I'm confusing the algorithm by doing 2 things at once. So please go over there and add that. Please go over there and sub and comment on some of the videos if you want. I mean, these videos are going to be very different. The Layman is a different channel. It's a different thing. So don't expect the Layman channel to be identical to Mr. Biscuit Speaks. On this channel, we search for insights and we search for epiphanies hidden in music. Whereas on the Layman channel is dedicated to the idea that our wisdom consists in the knowledge that we know nothing, and so we don't look through music. We just look through like philosophical conversations, like the Alex O'Connors, the Richard Dawkins, the Daniel Dennett's. I mean, not just atheists. I just mentioned 3 atheists, but interesting stuff. Discord. Discord. All right. I am going to give you guys a link to the Discord right now, comrades. Right now. Right now. Right now, immediately. Okay. Um, there is a link to the Discord. Super chat came in off subject. When will you be doing the next chapter in Rin's story? That is actually done. However, there is someone working on it. So ever since I got past 15,000 subscribers, there have been people like hitting me up for like business negotiations. And they're like, oh, I want to do this with your channel and I will pay you this. And then we'll correspond in this way. And so, uh, it's being worked on and it's going to be a really cool thing, but it is done already, so expect that in the very near future, as in this week. Yeah, yeah, that'll be here this week. So look guys, the Discord, trust me when I say I know absolutely nothing about the Discord. um I had Lucence actually help me with the Discord. So as far as getting in, I think that like there's a few voice channels we can all get in. So definitely go to the Discord. I'm going to learn it and develop in it, but it's at least some place we could all go offline to like hang out and talk about all this stuff. Let me see here. Brilliant. More Akala, please. Absolutely, that's coming up. Keep it up, mate. Thank you, John. Thank you for the super chat. I really appreciate you guys helping the channel out. It is growing like crazy. We're almost at 20,000 subscribers. 20,000 subscribers. 20,000. I mean, we've been at it for just about a month and some change. I'm looking forward to more Bo Burnham. John Frank says, "Keep it Anne Frank with the shank and the ick." Guys, do you guys know that there was a big? I think it was on Reddit. Like there was a bunch of people who were saying like, "Hey, we have to get Mr. Biscuit and Ren to do an interview." It was really really dope. I still have yet to email Ren's team. I have to kind of find how to set that up because I think it would be an amazing interview. Congratulations. I know nothing about Discord either. We can learn together. Yeah. I prefer what is it? What is it? Clubhouse. I'm on Clubhouse all the time. That would make my year. That would make my year too. I think Ren and I would have such a good conversation. I really, really think that. I'm not just saying that. Sh- 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 I like that Professor is like one of my nicknames on here. People are like, Professor Biscuit. Yes, very lovely, lovely indeed. Ren interview would be dope. Notifications going mental. As long as you don't ask us to tell the gross internet rabbit holes we have gotten sucked into. Nikki, you're goaded. That's dope. But let me see here. I'm gonna go into the Discord and just see how many people are a part of the Discord now. See, it takes me a while to even find the Discord on my phone. I might look like I'm 38, but I'm 83. The numbers are backwards. Okay, there it is. There's Discord. All right. All right. Yeah. We got some movement in there. We got some movement. Not too long. Not too long at all. Coming up. This is going to be a doozy. When will the next chapter be for Animal Farm? That's a phenomenal question. I say the next chapter for Animal Farm will be Monday. Everybody set your calendars. No, it won't be Monday. It'll be Tuesday. Yeah. Tuesday. The next Animal Farm will be Tuesday. Guys, Ryan was here earlier and I actually like shouted him out. I've known him since I was young and he was just in here. And I know him, like I know his profile picture. He was like commenting in this thing. Please leave the Discord like again. Oh, please leave the Discord link. The Discord link. Oh no. That's up top is the that is the layman link. So if you guys have not yet clicked the link to the layman, that's the channel that all subsequent books will be at. So right now, go over there and subscribe over there. Very important. Very important. Let me see. I'm going to drop the Discord link again. Hang on. The Discord link. Boop. John says that's a long wait. You know, I want to have a book thing every day. I just want to be like, I want to do every day. But that's not really tenable. That's not the way the algorithm is like built for growth and everything. I just have a, and plus I have to do wisdom school at the same time. What's phenomenal about wisdom school, and Lucence actually came. Lucence and his son came to wisdom school and we met in person. It was the most phenomenal thing ever. And just met me, just learned about me on the channel, came all the way to the Hilliard Library in Spokane and had wisdom school with us. What a legend. Lucence is completely goated. And then he helped me build the Discord. So dope. I am reading the books in advance because I can't wait. Love it. Love it. And make sure the link is at the top for The Layman, which is the channel that not only the next chapter of Animal Farm will be, but all subsequent chapters of 1984, all the other books. So I'm wondering what I should do here because I'm not that guy, pal. I'm not the YouTube guy. I'm wondering if I should leave Animal Farm up to chapter 8 on this channel, or if I should just start moving those chapters over to the you know what? I could just download them. Yeah, I could just download those videos and move them over to the other one and then, yeah, it'll work. Everything will be gravy. I really do agree with everyone because I've had some emails and I've had some comments suggesting that what we're doing here is kind of an important thing, and I cannot help but agree. I think it's a really, really, really dope thing. Like this is a really, really fun community. Somebody said Pariah said biscuits and gravy. Gravy is my daughter. That's Mrs. Gravy. Little Miss Gravy. And my wife is Mrs. Biscuits. My wife hates that. My wife is no. If my wife heard that, she's like, no, I'm not. You and Livy have your biscuits and gravy thing. Oxford says this has been so enriching. I am extremely glad. It's enriching for me too. John says sounds kind of sus. This club lifted my spirits. I'm glad. Hey, you know what I need? Oh, I'm so glad I thought about it. I need mods because this thing is going to get huge. Like this thing is going to get bigger. and there's going to be trolls. I think that there's already been some trolls. Have there been trolls in the chat? How, like, what do you guys' experience been with trolls in the chat? Spam a little, yeah, today, yes, nothing serious. Yeah. Let me see. I just made somebody a mod. Let me see. I'm just passing out duties like Napoleon. I'm making mods of men. Modded comrade. Okay, says not too bad. We just ignore them like Benjamin would. I feel like Benjamin was the inspiration for Eeyore. Eeyore is a donkey who's just like, yeah, bro, like I know where this is going. It's not good. No Mrs. Biscuits. Reading through the chat is so legit. Thank you, Nikki. I deeply appreciate it. Kim said Eeyore came first. What? Eeyore probably did come first. Hmm. Hang on a minute. Do, 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 do. All right, we've got some mods. We've got some mods now. Now we're a little army. The mods get to sit on the high hay and eat apples and milk. I love speaking in the animal farm language. Yeah, we need to assign dogs. The moderators are the dogs. Biscuit Army merch. Guys, the merch, listen to this. Check out the merch ideas. Check out the merch ideas. The ideas for merch are redonkulous, guys. Okay, so ideas for merch. The dynamic is gigantic. Nice to meet you. Of course, apples and milk merch for sure. The cascade is infinite is going to be merch. Uh, I'm cognitively available because we always talk about like cognitively limited states like stress and boredom. So like having a hat that says I'm cognitively available would just be really funny, I think. Of course, hats and shirts that say I'm an Insight member or I'm an Epiphany member to kind of promote the channel, cause more growth. Um, and then I want mugs like coffee mugs that say I'm a man of a certain age or I'm a woman of a certain age. Just because just because whenever I don't get something, I say, look guys, I'm a man of a certain age. I think I am a senior citizen even though I'm 38. People in my family don't live to see 70. It's not a thing. It's not a thing. I'm old. I don't look old, but as far as my family goes, I've lived most of my life and I'm content with that. I've come to terms with it. Kat says you're a baby. I'm cognitive. Snowball merch. Snowball did it is crazy merch. Snowball did it is crazy merch. I love that. Blame Snowball is fire. That is amazing. I need to. I'm gonna post. I'm gonna post. Because I need these ideas like rolling in. There should be like a merch chat in the Discord where we just talk about merch. But guys, I've been on this for far too long now. I'm gonna close the stream just for anyone else who's wanting to watch the, the playback on the actual chapter. Guys, love you all, and by loving you, I mean that there is a felt recognition of our shared being. Okay, uh, love and appreciate all of you, and I will see you next time. join the layman channel. That's where the next chapter is going to be on Tuesday, probably.